welcome back. This is the Math 980 final review. I've posted on the Canvas site a final from the fall of 2017, so I'll do a few problems out of that. But take a look at that before you watch the video. Try to do those problems, and I'll just do a couple that I think people might have some issues with. So first and foremost, this is not your final. That it's just one that was in the past. The very first question has a question, negative x equals 9, asking you to solve for x. I wouldn't believe that this was a question on a final exam if I didn't actually give this final myself in 2017. But you just divide this by -1 or multiply it by -1 and you've solved for x, right? So there are a few that I think somebody came back and said, hey, let's not do this kind of thing again, but you never know. So that's a possibility still. So let's take a look at 2 though. 2 is worth taking a look at. Number 2 says to simplify the expression. And it is 3x to the 6, y to the 4th, z to the 7th, and then this is all squared, right? So really they're testing 2 things. If a whole bunch of stuff that's multiplied inside parentheses gets raised to a power, every single one of these things inside the parentheses gets that power. If something is already raised to a power, you're going to multiply those powers together. But the biggest mistake is people seem to forget the 3, right? The 3 is something being multiplied in here. It still gets squared. So your answer would be 9. X to the 6 getting squared is x to the 12. Y to the 8. And then z to the 14. So that's what we're looking for on that one. All right. Number 3 is worth looking at, I think, because number 3 is easy. It's easy to mess up number 3. I'm going to get my face out of the... There we go, that should be better. We're given a function. We say f of x is equal to 2x squared minus 8x and minus 3. And then we're asked to evaluate f of -2, I think, yeah. So really I just want to take this -2 and plug it into the x's into this equation. But I have to be careful because it's a negative number, so when I take -2 and square it, this is where they're expecting you to mess up. -8 times -2. Fewer people mess up here, but it still happens. And then -3. The mess up here is when you say -2 squared is -4. It's not. -2 squared is +4. So this is 2 multiplied by 4. And then the second mess up, the less common mess up, but sometimes you see it, is that this negative times negative, that goes positive. So 2 times 4 is 8, plus 16 minus 3. 8 plus 16 is 24, minus 3 is 21. Let's look at number 4. Number 4 says to solve log base 4 of x equals -3. And I would rewrite this as an exponential. I would take it 4 raised to the -3 equals x. And I've actually solved it. All I have to do now is simplify the left-hand side. 4 to the -3 is 1 over 4 to the 3rd. And so I have 4 times 4 is 16 times another 4 is 64. And so I have 1 over 64 is x. Good. All right, let's look at number 6. Six says, use the basis property to solve 2 to the n equals 16. The basis property is just writing each side as the same base to some exponent, which I can do because 16 is 2 to the 4th. And that way we're done. N has to be equal to 4 in order for these guys to be done, or to equal, and that's it. All right, let's take a look at number 10. Whenever there's a question like number 10, I see a lot of people mess it up because they don't know how to take the story context and do what we've done in class with it. And that happens quite a bit. So on number 10, there is a bit of a story. It says in 2012, there were 597 jobs. In a small town. In 2017, there were 682 jobs. And then the question says, find the rate of change in jobs per year. Right? So jobs per year means jobs per is divided by, so I have jobs divided by years, right? Unit-wise, jobs would be in the numerator, years are in the denominator, but we're looking for the rate of change or the slope, right? If you remember, the rate of change, which is the same thing as the slope, is the change in one thing, so it was like y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, when we just have data, or points, right? But we have points. Since years are in the denominator, they're like your x points. Jobs end up in the numerator, so they're your y points. And so I have those 2 points. And the rest of this junk doesn't really matter. Blah, 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 the story is not a story anymore. You have 2 points, find the slope between these 2 points. So pick one to be y2, I'll call it 682. Minus y1 is 597. Divided by x2, which I'm going to call the x component of the same y2. So 2017 minus 2012, right? And that's it. The result of this is your slope. So, is that 85 over 5? Yeah. And that is 17. Yep. And so, 17, that's your answer. Okay. So be aware of this one, understand that one. It's probably going to be worth your while to know how to do it. All right, let's look at 11. Again, everybody seems to just hate taking the math and applying it to the real world, which is what we tried, try to get you to be able to do at some point. So when we have story problems, people are just like, oh, screw this, I don't want to do it. But do it, it's worth looking at. So let's look at number 11. A student has scores of 97, 89, and 96 on her first 3 tests. She needs an average of at least 93.
Yeah. Well, here, that's good. Thank you.
Right? In order to pass a class. So they're asking you what can her last score be. So really what we want is the average, her average of the tests has to be greater than, and at least means greater than or equal to 93, right? She gets that, she's got an A, or whatever it is that she's looking for to pass the class. And so it's this expression of average. The biggest mistake, there's two mistakes. The first is where you create the expression for the average, and the average is just all of the tests added together and divided by however many tests there are. And so it seems easy enough because I have the first test, plus the second test, plus that third test. The thing that is missing for a lot of the mistakes I see is that there's one more test, right? It says in the problem, what does she have to get on her fourth test? So there is another test. That's what the problem is to figure out what that test has to be in order for her to pass the class. That means that there's 4, so the sum of the 4 tests divided by 4 has to be greater than or equal to 93. Okay? So that's the biggest step here, is to be able to create the average, and then greater than or equal to 93. The next big thing that I see is what to do with this expression, right? Now in the numerator I can add 97, 89, and 96 together, right? Now let me get a little room here. So that is 282. Maybe I should check my math, I don't know. It'd be embarrassing if I'm up here doing a final review and can't add. 97 plus 89 plus 96. 282, glad I checked. Boink. Okay. Plus that x still, all divided by 4, still greater than or equal to 93. And I see people try to simplify the 282 with a 4. You cannot do that because the 282 is not a factor in the numerator, it's wrapped up in a sum, right? So I can't cancel the 282 with a 4 in any way. What I can do is get rid of this 4 by multiplying both sides by 4 and eliminate the denominator. So I'll multiply the left-hand side by 4, it eliminates that 4 because this 4 is a factor, right? It's multiplied by everything up top. And then I just multiply the right-hand side by 4. Okay. So this leaves me with 282 plus x is greater than or equal to 372. We'll subtract your 282 and then just solve for x. So I've got x completely isolated, has to be greater than or equal to 90. Okay. Good. All right, let's look at 13. 13 says solve. And we're given the equation 1/3 y minus 8 equals 1/7 y. Okay. So here a lot of people will try to get rid of your denominators, which is great, that's what I would do as well. The lowest common multiple of your denominators is 21, so I need to multiply the left-hand side and the right-hand side by 21. And the biggest mistake I see is people coming in and saying, I'm going to multiply this by 21, and I'm going to multiply this by 21, and the 8's a whole number, so I don't need to multiply it by 21. And that's the mistake, is because in order for this to work, you have to multiply the left-hand side and the right-hand side by the same thing, but you're not multiplying the whole left-hand side over here. You can't just pick and choose what gets multiplied by 21. you have to multiply this 8 by 21. Even though it's not a fraction, it still needs to be multiplied by the same thing everything else gets multiplied by, right? So when I do that, the 21 simplifies with a 3, leaving me with a 7 and a y, so I have 7y. Minus 8 times 21 is 168. The 21 simplifies with a 7, that leaves me with just a 3, so 3y, right? And then I'll subtract my 3y to the left. And while I'm doing that, bringing that to the left, I'm going to add 168 to the right. That gives me 4y on the left equals 168 on the right. I can divide both sides by 4, and I get y is equal to 42. There we go. All right, let's look at 17. Seventeen says solve, graph, and give interval notation for the inequality. And I have 8 plus 6 multiplied by the absolute value of 4x minus 1 is less than 26. So the biggest mistake I see here is people taking 8 and adding it to 6. You can't do that because the 6 is a factor over here. That would be like taking 8 plus 6x and saying, oh, that's 14x. Nope, it's not. You can't do that, right? They're not like terms because the 6 is multiplied by a whole bunch of junk. So I've got to get rid of this 8 first, and I will. Subtract both sides by 8, leaving me with 6. The magnitude of 4x minus 1 is less than 18. Okay. And I still want to isolate this absolute value, so I'm going to divide everything by 6, which I can do because everything's just product over on the left-hand side. 6 multiplied by a binomial. Divide by 6. I've isolated my absolute value. 4x minus 1 is less than 3. And now I'm ready to treat this like an absolute value, once I've gone through all of this to isolate the absolute value. So I'm going to take this and write my 2 equations. And give myself a little bit of room here. I would take this and say 4x minus 1 is less than 3, right? And because it's the absolute value is less than, that's an and conjunction, so it's and 4x minus 1 is greater than negative 3. And then I just solve these, right? Add 1, leaving me with 4x is less than 4. Divide by 4, and I get x is less than 1. And add 1, that gives me 4x is greater than negative 2. Divide by 4, and that gives me x is greater than negative 1/2. Right? So I've solved it. It asked me to do 3 things. Solve it. I did. That's this part here, the x less than 1 and x is greater than negative 1/2. It also asked me to graph it. So it's a one-dimensional graph, there's only x's involved, so x is less than 1, x is greater than negative 1/2, it's an and, it's strict inequality, so they're opens and then shaded in between the two. And it's easy then to ask, or to answer the next part of it where it says, give the interval notation. That interval notation is negative 1/2 to 1, parentheses on both, and I'm done. Those are the 3 things they want. Solved it, graphed it, wrote it in interval notation. 21, let's look at that one. And I'm not gonna draw it because that'll take me all day, and it'll look like garbage anyway. So I'm going to just throw it right up there. We're looking at that. And it says, write the equation of the linear regression represented in the graph below. So what I'm going to do, still my little stylus here. There's a couple of points. This one right here, my line goes through that point, and then there's one right here as well. That's all I want. If I look at those points, right, my line goes through this point here, it goes through this point. All I really care about is where these 2 points are. That first point is at 1, 2. And this point over to the left is at -3, -2. After I have these 2 values, the drawing is garbage. I don't need it, it doesn't matter to me. All I'm going to do is take this m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Right. Call one of these 0.1, call the other one 0.2, so this would be x1 y1 and x2 y2. And so then I would just take y2 is 2 minus y1 is -2 over x2 is 1 minus x1, which is -3. Watch your negatives here because I minus, so 2 minus -2 is 2 plus 2, which is 4. And then 1 minus -3 is 1 plus 3, which is also 4. And so my slope is 1, right? And then all I really need to do is figure out the b, this y-intercept, and I can see on the graph that it goes through the point 0, 1, and that's my y-intercept. And therefore my equation is y equals mx plus b, where m is 1, y is also 1, so it is y equals x plus 1, 1x plus 1, and that's my equation. Good. All right. And then of course, let's say look at 23. '23 deals with the 2-dimensional systems, and it specifically says to solve by not graphing, by substitution. And it's actually set up to do so. It's set up so that if you decided I don't want to do substitution, it's going to be harder to do anything else. It's more work to set this up to turn it into an addition or elimination method. So all you're really looking for is this y is already solved in terms of x. And so I'm going to take that and plug it into the other one. So that becomes x plus 2y, which is 2x plus 3, is equal to -4. Distribute that too, so I have x plus 4x plus 6 is equal to -4. I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides and then combine my x's together to give me 5x equals -10. You divide each side by 5 and you can see that x is going to equal -2. And then since I know x is -2, I'm going to plug that back into the x, and that gives me y equals 2 times -2 plus 3, or -4 plus 3, or -1. So I have the point x is -2, y is -1, solved, right? So know how to do these, know how to do the substitutions, know how to do the elimination methods, know how to graph like as the worst last resort. Yeah, know those. All right, and let's look at 27. Excuse me. 27 says you deposit $300 into an account earning 7% interest, compounded annually. And we're going to leave it there for 15 years. Okay. So then it tells you the formula. We've got this A equals P times 1 plus R to the T. We might have seen this before as the amount as a function of time instead of just an A is the amount initially put in, right? That A naught is the P, the principal. So either one of these equations, 1 plus R to the T, they're the same thing, right? The principal though is 300. The rate is 7%, so 0.07, and we're leaving it in there for 15 years. Obviously a calculator question, so I can simplify a little bit. 300 multiplied by 1.07 to the 15. Not happening in my head, so let me throw that in the calculator. Or I suppose I could just cheat and look at the answer key. I get 300 times 1.07 raised to the 15 is 827. And I would round this to 71 cents. That's what you've got. $527 for 15 years of work. Okay. All right. Now let's take a look at number 30. Question like number 30 has been on every final I've given for this class, hintity hint hint, since the beginning of time. The admission for a play is, that's the ugliest 3 I've ever drawn, $3 for children, and $5 for adults. On a certain evening, 330 people attended. And $1,250 was collected. Right? How many children and how many adults attended the play? So, I have to create 2 equations. Well, I don't. There's a way around it, but we've done it, so we're going to create 2 equations. I can say that children are X or C. I'm going to go C and adults are A. That way in the end I don't have to refer back to see which one I called what. So number of child tickets is C, and number of adult tickets is A. And so I have the equation that the number of children's tickets plus the number of adults tickets are 330, because that's how many tickets were sold that day. So the first equation is just ticket numbers. The number of children's tickets plus the number of adults, 330 in total. The next one is about the money, right? If each child's ticket costs $3, then I get 3 multiplied by C dollars from selling children's tickets that night. If every adult ticket costs $5, then I have 5A is the total amount brought in by the sale of the adult tickets. And if I add those 2 together, it should be the total amount that I sold that day, $12.50. So you can see this is set up to be either a substitution works pretty well, or an elimination, right? We're gonna get big numbers because we started off with, 1250. But I can, if it were me, I would eliminate, and I would multiply this top guy by -3. And I'll just write it under it. That gives me -3c minus 3a is equal to -990. In fact, the numbers get better here because I'm going to subtract off a pretty big chunk. If I add these two together, 3c and -3c are gone, that's 0. 5a minus 3a is 2a, hey, that's not too bad. I should say a, oh that's terrible, I'm not going to do it, too late. And then 1250 minus 990 is 260. Excuse me. And if I divide each side by 2, A is 130. So 130 of the 330 people, therefore you can just take this and subtract that, that gives you 200 children, right? Or I could plug it back up into this equation, but that's essentially what I would end up doing anyway, is subtracting it. And so I'm taking 330 minus the 130, and I get 200. All right. Hopefully that's helpful. Good luck on your final, and I will never see you again. I don't know. Let me know if you have any questions.